I thought I knew who I was, until the day everything changed. My 18th birthday was supposed to be the start of everything I'd dreamed about. I woke up to the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting up the stairs, sunlight pouring through my window, and the familiar sound of my parents laughing in the kitchen. For a moment, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. 18 felt like a magic number, a doorway to adulthood, freedom, and all the possibilities I'd spent years imagining. I took my time getting ready, savoring the anticipation, the way the world seemed to shimmer with promise. But as soon as I walked into the kitchen, I sensed something was off. My mom's smile was a little too bright, her eyes darting away from mine. Dad kept glancing at his watch, tapping his fingers on the table. The usual birthday traditions, my favorite breakfast, the off-key singing, the pile of presents, were all there. But it felt like everyone was acting in a play, reading lines from a script they didn't quite believe in. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being dramatic. Maybe they were planning a surprise party, or maybe they were just emotional about their only child growing up. But the feeling wouldn't leave me. It clung to the edges of every conversation, every forced laugh, every awkward pause. Then, just as I was about to open my last present, the doorbell rang. My dad jumped up so quickly he nearly knocked over his coffee. He disappeared down the hall, and when he returned, he was holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. My name was written on the front in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. My heart pounded as I took it from him. "Who's it from?" I asked, but neither of them answered. My mom reached for my hand, her grip trembling. My dad cleared his throat, his voice suddenly serious. "There's something we need to tell you," he said, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and sadness. "Something about your past. Something we should have told you a long time ago." And in that moment, the world I thought I knew began to unravel. If you had asked me yesterday, I would have told you my childhood was perfect. I was the girl with the doting parents, the cozy house on Maple Lane, the kind of life people envied from afar. My mom made every holiday magical, handmade costumes for Halloween, gingerbread houses at Christmas, even heart-shaped pancakes on Valentine's Day. My dad was the steady, gentle presence who taught me how to ride a bike, who cheered the loudest at every school play, who always had a silly joke ready when I needed it most. I remember summer evenings spent chasing fireflies in the backyard, my parents' laughter echoing through the warm air. I remember rainy Saturdays curled up on the couch, reading stories together, my mom's arm wrapped around my shoulders. I remember the way my dad would tuck me in at night whispering, "You're our greatest gift." I believed him. I believed every word. But now, sitting at the kitchen table with that mysterious envelope in my lap, I started to replay those memories with new eyes. Suddenly, the little oddities I'd always ignored began to surface, sharp and unsettling. There was the time in 3rd grade when I needed my birth certificate for a school project. My mom had fumbled through drawers, her face tight with worry, before finally producing a photocopy, never the original. "We keep the real one somewhere safe," she'd said, but I'd never seen it, or the way my parents would exchange glances whenever someone commented on how little I resembled them. "She's got your eyes," a neighbor would say, and my mom would laugh a little too loudly, her hand tightening around mine. I always thought it was just a joke, a quirk of genetics. Now I wasn't so sure. There were the family photo albums, too. The first few pages were filled with pictures of me as a baby, but none of my mom pregnant, none from the hospital. I'd asked once, and she'd said she hated how she looked back then, that she'd thrown those photos away. I'd accepted it, never questioning further. Even the bedtime stories seemed different now. My favorite was always the one about the lost princess who found her way home. My mom would stroke my hair and say, "No matter what, you'll always belong with us." I used to find comfort in those words. Now they echoed in my mind, heavy with new meaning. As I sat there, the warmth of my childhood memories began to fade, replaced by a creeping sense of suspicion. Had I missed the signs all along? Had my parents been hiding something from me? even as they showered me with love. The innocence I'd always felt was slipping away, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. I looked at my parents, searching their faces for answers. My mom's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands twisting in her lap. My dad stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. The tension in the room was thick, suffocating, so different from the easy comfort I'd always known. I wanted to believe that nothing had changed, that my childhood was still as perfect as I remembered. But the doubts were there now, impossible to ignore. Every happy memory was shadowed by questions I'd never thought to ask, and as I held the envelope, my heart pounding, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life, about myself, was about to be tested. I wasn't sure I was ready for the answers, but I knew I couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when the truth was finally within reach. I could barely breathe as I sat there, the envelope heavy in my hands, my parents' faces drawn and pale. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until finally my dad cleared his throat. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, trembling at the edges. "We should have told you sooner," he began, his eyes flickering to my mom for support. She nodded, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "But we wanted to protect you." We thought it was for the best." My heart hammered in my chest. "Protect me from what?" I managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. My mom reached across the table, her hand shaking as she touched mine. "Sweetheart, you're adopted. We brought you home when you were just a few days old." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Adopted? The word echoed in my mind, foreign and impossible. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, the reassurance that this was all some terrible joke. But their faces were grave, their eyes pleading for understanding. I pulled my hand away, my mind racing. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why now?" My dad's shoulders slumped as if the weight of the secret had finally crushed him. "We wanted to tell you when you were old enough to understand. But there's more, and you deserve to know everything." He gestured to the envelope. My hands shook as I broke the seal, pulling out a stack of papers, legal documents, letters, and a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. My mom's voice was barely audible as she explained. "Your biological family, they were very wealthy. Your grandmother especially. She loved you very much, but she was very sick when you were born. She wanted to make sure you'd be cared for, that you'd have a real family. So she set up a trust, a very large inheritance. But there was a condition." I stared at the papers, the words blurring together. "What kind of condition?" My dad took a deep breath. "The money, $91 million, would only be yours if you were raised by a stable, loving family. The lawyer who handled the adoption was in charge of checking in on us, making sure we were good parents. That's why we had to keep it a secret. We didn't want you to feel different or like you were just here for the money, $91 million. The number was so huge it didn't even feel real. I tried to process what they were saying, but all I could feel was a cold, hollow ache spreading through my chest. "So you adopted me because of the money?" My voice cracked, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. My mom shook her head frantically. "No, never! We wanted a child so badly. We loved you from the moment we saw you. The inheritance was it was part of the arrangement. But you were always our daughter. Always." I looked at the photograph again, the woman's eyes hauntingly familiar. My grandmother, my real grandmother. I wondered what she would think of all this, of me, of the life I'd lived, of the secrets that had shaped everything. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thick. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You should have told me," I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You should have trusted me." My dad reached for me, but I pulled away. "Please, honey, we did what we thought was right. We love you. That's all that ever mattered." But I couldn't hear them anymore. My mind was spinning, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed air, space, answers, anything but this suffocating truth. Without another word, I grabbed the envelope and fled the kitchen, the sound of my parents calling after me fading into the distance. I ran up the stairs, my vision blurred with tears. The weight of everything I'd just learned pressing down on me like a tidal wave. Adopted, inheritance, conditions, secrets. My entire life, every memory, every moment, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't know who I was anymore, or who I could trust. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the envelope clutched to my chest like a lifeline and a curse. My mind replayed every word, every look, every moment from the kitchen, searching for something, anything that would make this all make sense. But the more I thought, the more questions I had. If my parents had hidden something this big, what else were they keeping from me? By dawn, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold against the hardwood floor, and crept down the hallway. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost accusing. I paused outside my parents' bedroom, listening to their soft, uneven breathing. I wondered if they were sleeping at all, or if they were lying awake, haunted by the same secrets. I started in the study. The one room I'd always been told was for grown-ups only. The door was never locked, but I'd learned early on that it was a place of bills, taxes, and boring paperwork. Now it felt like a vault of answers. I rifled through drawers, careful not to make a sound. At first, all I found were the usual things: old receipts, birthday cards, a stack of utility bills. But then, tucked behind a row of dusty books, I found a small metal box. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside were folders labeled with my name, dates, and a law firm I'd never heard of. I pulled out the first folder and flipped through the contents. Adoption papers, court documents, and a series of letters, some typed, some handwritten, between my parents and someone named Mr. Hargrove. The letters were formal at first. All business. Mr. Hargrove wrote about the terms of the trust, quarterly check-ins, and ensuring the child's well-being. But as the years went on, the tone changed. My parents' responses grew more desperate, more personal. They wrote about their fears, their gratitude, their struggles to be the parents I deserved. There were mentions of medical bills, job losses, and sleepless nights spent worrying about inspections and reports. One letter from my mom stopped me cold. She wrote, "We love her more than anything, but sometimes I worry she'll find out and think we only wanted her for the money. How do we prove to her that she's our daughter, not our obligation?" I sat back, the papers trembling in my hands. For the first time, I saw the other side of the secret, the fear and love tangled together, the sacrifices they'd made to keep me safe and happy. But I also saw the shadow of the inheritance, always lurking in the background, shaping every decision, every moment of my life. I kept searching, driven by a need to know everything. I found bank statements showing deposits from the trust, notes about meetings with Mr. Hargrove, and even a faded photograph of my parents holding me as a baby, their faces a mix of joy and terror. The more I uncovered, the more complicated everything became. Love and greed, hope and fear, truth and lies, all woven together in a story I'd never been told. By the time the sun rose, I was surrounded by papers, my head spinning with revelations. I didn't know if I felt closer to my parents or further away. All I knew was that the truth was bigger and messier than I'd ever imagined, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more. More secrets, more lies, more pieces of myself hidden somewhere in this house, waiting to be found. By the time my parents woke up, I was waiting for them in the kitchen, surrounded by stacks of papers and letters. The sun was barely up, but I felt like I'd aged years in a single night. My mom entered first, her eyes puffy and red, followed by my dad, who looked like he hadn't slept at all. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with everything I'd discovered. I broke it first, my voice sharper than I intended. "How long were you going to keep lying to me?" My mom flinched, her hand flying to her mouth. My dad tried to reach for me, but I pulled away, clutching one of the letters. "I found everything," The adoption papers, the trust, the letters to Mr. Hargrove, all of it. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? My dad's shoulders sagged, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. My mom sat across from me, her hands trembling as she tried to find the right words. We were scared, she whispered. We were so scared, honey. We thought if you knew, you'd never believe we loved you for you. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. But you let me grow up believing I was your real daughter. You let me believe everything was normal, when all along there were conditions, inspections, money, so much money hanging over us. Was any of it real? My dad looked up, his eyes shining with tears. You are our real daughter. We wanted you more than anything. We tried for years to have a child, but it never happened. When the adoption agency called, we thought it was a miracle. We didn't even know about the inheritance at first. Not until the lawyer explained everything. My mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the hurt too raw. So you took me because of the money? No, she cried, her voice breaking. We took you because we wanted a family. The money, it was a blessing, but also a curse. We had to prove ourselves over and over. Every time we struggled, every time we fought, I worried someone would take you away. I worried you'd find out and think we were just caretakers, not parents. I stared at them, my anger warring with a deep, aching sadness. But you lied to me. My whole life you lied. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? My dad's voice was hoarse. We made mistakes. We should have told you sooner. But we were afraid of losing you, afraid of losing everything. We tried to give you a good life, the best we could, but we're only human. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who I am. Was any of it real? Was any of it ever about me, or was it always about the money? My mom sobbed, her shoulders shaking. You are our daughter. Nothing will ever change that. We love you. Please believe that. But I couldn't answer. The pain was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and looked at them. These people who had raised me, loved me, and lied to me. Can I ever trust you again? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, unanswered, as I turned and walked away, leaving them, and everything I thought I knew, behind. I spent the next day in a fog, wandering through the house like a ghost. My parents gave me space, their voices hushed behind closed doors. I barely ate, barely slept, my mind spinning with questions that felt too big to answer. But one name kept echoing in my head, Mr. Hargrove, the lawyer who had orchestrated everything. If anyone could give me the truth, it was him. I found his number in one of the letters and dialed with trembling hands. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and warm, as if he'd been expecting my call. I was wondering when you'd reach out, he said gently. Would you like to come in? Sitting in his office, surrounded by shelves of old books and the faint scent of lemon polish, I felt like a child again, small, uncertain, desperate for answers. Mr. Hargrove offered me tea, then settled across from me, his eyes kind and steady. I know this must be overwhelming, he began, but I want you to understand something very important. The inheritance wasn't meant to control you or your parents. It was an act of love. He slid a photograph across the desk, a woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. Your grandmother, Eleanor. She adored you from the moment you were born. She was very ill, but she wanted to make sure you'd have the life she couldn't give you herself. She set up the trust to protect you, to make sure you'd be raised in a home filled with love, not just privilege. I stared at the photo, my heart aching with a longing I couldn't name. Did she ever meet me? Mr. Hargrove nodded. She held you once, just after you were born. She told me she felt at peace, knowing you'd be cared for. She chose your parents because she believed they would love you as their own. The money was her way of making sure you'd never want for anything, but the real gift was her hope that you'd grow up surrounded by kindness. He reached for a folder and handed me a letter, written in elegant looping script. This is from Eleanor to you. She wanted you to have it when you turned 18. My hand shook as I unfolded the paper. The words were simple, but they wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace. You are loved beyond measure. I hope you find happiness, not in what you inherit, but in the family you choose and the love you give. Tears blurred my vision. For the first time since the truth came out, I felt something other than anger or confusion. I felt seen. I felt chosen, not for money, but for love. As I left Mr. Hargrove's office, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. My story wasn't just about secrets and betrayal. It was also about hope and the quiet, fierce love of a grandmother I never got to know. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finding my own way forward. The days that followed felt like standing at a crossroads, each path leading somewhere I couldn't quite see. The truth about my adoption, the inheritance, my grandmother's wishes, it all swirled inside me, heavy and confusing. I had the power to walk away with more money than I could ever spend, to start over somewhere new, free from the lies and the pain. Or I could try to forgive, to rebuild something with the only family I'd ever known. The choice felt impossible. I spent hours alone, wandering the places that had shaped me. The backyard where I'd learned to ride my bike, my dad running behind me, breathless and laughing. The kitchen where my mom and I baked cookies, flour dusting our noses, her arms wrapped around me in a hug that always made me feel safe. Every memory was tinged with both warmth and doubt. Had it all been real, or just a performance for the sake of a fortune? One night I sat on my bed, the letter from my grandmother in my lap. Her words echoed in my mind. I hope you find happiness, not in what you inherit, but in the family you choose and the love you give. I realized I'd spent so much time searching for answers. I'd forgotten to ask myself what I truly wanted. I thought about what wealth could buy. Freedom, security, a fresh start. But I also thought about what it couldn't. It couldn't give me back the years of bedtime stories, the comfort of my mother's hand in mine, the pride in my father's eyes when I brought home a good grade. It couldn't fill the ache of loneliness or replace the laughter that had filled our home. Still, the hurt lingered. I remembered the look on my parents' faces when I confronted them. The fear, the regret, the love. I remembered the sacrifices I'd uncovered in their letters, the sleepless nights, the desperate hope that I would never feel like an obligation. I saw now that their love was real, even if it was tangled up in secrets and mistakes. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me, both the good and the bad. I saw myself as a little girl running into my parents' arms after a nightmare, their embrace steady and sure. I saw the awkward teenage years, the fights and slammed doors, the apologies whispered through tears. I saw the way my mom would brush the hair from my face when I was sick, the way my dad would sit beside me in silence when words weren't enough. I realized that family isn't about blood or money or even truth. It's about the moments that shape us, the love that endures even when it's messy and imperfect. It's about forgiveness, not just for others but for ourselves. The next morning, I found my parents in the living room, sitting side by side, their hands clasped tightly together. They looked up as I entered, hope and fear mingling in their eyes. I don't know if I can forget everything that's happened, I said, my voice steady but soft. But I want to try. I want to understand. I want to choose my own path, not because of the money, but because I still love you. I want us to be a family, but on my terms this time. No more secrets. Tears streamed down my mom's face as she reached for me, and my dad's shoulders shook with relief. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of peace, of belonging, of finally choosing for myself. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done letting the past define me. From now on, I would decide what family meant, and that was worth more than any inheritance. The decision to accept the inheritance didn't come with the rush of excitement I'd once imagined. Instead, it felt like a quiet, steady resolve, a responsibility, not just a gift. I thought about my grandmother, about the love and hope she'd poured into her final act. I thought about all the children who never got the chance I had, and all the families who struggled in silence, weighed down by secrets and fear. I knew I couldn't change the past, but maybe I could help shape someone else's future. With my parents' support, I began the process of setting up a foundation in my grandmother's name. The Eleanor Grace Foundation would provide grants and resources for adopted children and families, legal support, counseling, scholarships, and emergency funds for those in crisis. I wanted to create a place where no one would feel alone or ashamed, where love and belonging weren't measured by blood or money, but by the courage to choose each other day after day. The work gave me purpose. I met with social workers, adoption advocates, and families from all walks of life. I listened to their stories of heartbreak and hope, of loss and new beginnings. Each one reminded me that my pain wasn't unique, but it could be transformed into something meaningful. I poured my energy into the foundation, determined to honor my grandmother's legacy and my own journey. At home, things changed, too. My parents and I started therapy together, learning how to talk about the hard things without fear or shame. We set new boundaries, honesty above all, space when we needed it, and forgiveness for the wounds that would take time to heal. There were still moments of awkwardness, of old hurts resurfacing, but there was also laughter, and a new kind of closeness that came from facing the truth together. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, my dad reached for my hand. "We're proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not because of the money or the foundation, but because you chose to turn something painful into something good. You're teaching us what it means to be brave." My mom nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "We can't change the past, but we can be better now. Thank you for giving us that chance." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I saw my parents not as the keepers of secrets, but as people, flawed, scared, and trying their best. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that had weighed me down for so long. The foundation's first event was a small gathering at a local community center. Families shared their stories, children played together, and I felt my grandmother's presence in every smile, every hug, every word of encouragement. I stood at the front of the room, my parents by my side, and spoke from the heart. We are more than the circumstances of our birth, more than the secrets we inherit. We are the families we choose, the love we give, and the courage to turn pain into purpose. My story isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us. As the applause filled the room, I looked at my parents and knew we had finally found our way back to each other, not as the perfect family, but as a real one, stronger, more honest, and ready to face whatever came next, together. Looking back, I realized my story was never just about secrets or money. It was about the journey to find myself, to understand where I came from, and to decide who I wanted to become. I spent so long believing that my worth was tied to the circumstances of my birth, or the size of an inheritance, or the approval of others. But the truth is, none of those things define me. What matters is the love I give, the choices I make, and the family I choose, every single day. Forgiveness wasn't easy. There were moments when the pain felt too sharp, when the betrayal seemed too deep to ever heal. But holding on to anger only kept me trapped in the past. Letting go, opening my heart to understanding, allowed me to move forward, not just with my parents, but with myself. I learned that real strength comes from vulnerability, from admitting when we're hurt, and from daring to hope for something better. If you're listening to my story and see pieces of your own life reflected here, I want you to know you're not alone. Maybe your family isn't what you expected, or maybe you're carrying secrets that feel too heavy to share. Maybe you're searching for belonging or struggling to forgive. Whatever your journey looks like, remember this: family is chosen, not bought. Your worth is never measured in dollars or by anyone else's standards. You are enough, just as you are. I hope my story inspires you to reach out, to have the hard conversations, to forgive when you're ready, and to build the kind of family that lifts you up. If you've been through something similar, or if you're still searching for your place in the world, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Let's create a space where we can support each other, celebrate our victories, and heal together. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of this journey with me. Remember, the most valuable inheritance any of us can receive is love. The kind we give, the kind we choose, and the kind that endures no matter what.